There you go.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is we have two new folks on the Zoom. I'd like to do a round of introduction and welcomes. So I will start first with Emily Smith, who is our newest executive team member. Welcome, Emily, to the executive team. We're happy to have you as Secretary Treasurer. And we also have our new Deputy Executive Director, Emily Mish. Did I pronounce your
Mischeck?
Mischeck? Well, I knew I was going to butcher that one. My apologies. Welcome. We are really happy to have you on board. So welcome. If you wanted to say a few words, we'd love to welcome you, either one of you. So we'll open the floor.
Hi, everyone. It's Emily Nishik, and I'm just really excited to be joining the team here. This will be a little bit of a new experience for me. I came from the nonprofit world and ran a college access and success organization prior to this, but really looking forward to jumping in and working with you all in the coming year. So thanks for having me.
Great. Welcome. Happy to have you. And Emily noted, and Sammy, you also have to leave early, is that correct?
Yeah, I have family friends I haven't seen for 5 years downstairs, so half an hour would be great.
So I think what we can do, let's first make some changes to the agenda to try to accommodate that. Emily, I don't know how much we can accommodate your leaving early, but we'll just get through as much as we can. What we can do is move item E up to B to switch them both. So we'll make the succession plan discussion item B. And we'll move ESG investing to E. Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as modified and updated?
I move as such.
All right. Any discussion? A second. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay, our agenda is approved. So we will start with association business 3A. So I wanted to, you all were sent the updated employment contract. So I have some thoughts and things I wanted to share here. The reason we are reviewing the updated contract. On June 17th, the executive director's employment agreement was approved by the board. However, there was one item on the contract that was not finalized and was left out to negotiate. There was some language in the cover sheet and in the document of our board packet that indicated that the president has the ability to negotiate any additional items in the contract. That is not something that I indicated to the board prior to the approval of the contract. The item that we negotiated, and this is why I sent you the updated contract, is under section 11 under expenses. We negotiated an increase for automobile expenses for Jim and an increase of $250 monthly. So I went from $750 to $1,000 monthly. I found the request to be reasonable and agreed to the request. The employment contract has been updated to reflect this update. And I wanted to share this with the executive committee and ask that after a discussion and a review to approve the update to the employment contract. So in my discussions with Jim, he shared with me that there is a section of the bylaw that allows the executive committee to act on certain items, and that is bylaw 4.1.1. Just as a reference, if someone wants to look that up. So happy to open the floor for discussion. This is something I think it's a really reasonable request. I did approve it in conversations with Jim. I thought it was a reasonable request. He hasn't asked for an increase for those expenses. And so I did want to approve that. However, I did want to share this with the executive team. If for anything to get your approval to the increase, what I'd like to do is ask for a vote of approval for the updated contract, and then we will share that update in our conversation with the board when we meet again. And that could be when we have our we may have a meeting coming up pretty shortly for new appointees to the board. But happy to open the floor for any questions or comments. And Sammy, if there is anything you want to add to that, Chris, I see your hand is raised, and we'll have Sammy go.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
I'm assuming this increase is due to the extremely increased cost of gas and travel expenses, and I fully support that.
Yes, yeah, it is. Sammy?
Yeah, again, in support of it, I'm putting on my calendar the fall regionals only, and I can only imagine driving that Jim is going to put there is going to way exceed that. So really appreciate his commitment for the membership, and that's a very reasonable request. To that, I actually want to ask you, Jim, I read the carve out for the executive committee to act on behalf of the board, and there is an exemption, they say, except for anything specific, let me read it, except for anything that is reserved to the board under the terms of the bylaws. I don't think this is a matter that is reserved to the board under the terms of the bylaws. Am I right?
Yes, Sammy, you are correct. So
Okay.
in the motion that was made, and I asked Mary this, she did not break executive session, by the way. But in the motion that was made, it was left up to the president to negotiate the contract, which means the board has then delegated to the president. I think due diligence would require the executive committee to approve and then notify the board as you're allowed to act under 4.1.1 of our bylaws.
Wonderful. Yeah, with that, I think this is a really great course of action. We vote on it according to the bylaws, then it's approved, and then the board is notified either via an agenda item and the next update or an email.
Okay. And so, any other comments or questions about the update? Okay. All right, let me write my notes here. So seeing none, what I'd like to do, I'd like to hear a motion to approve the finalized executive director employment contract. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Madam,
Yes.
I move to approve the amended executive director employment agreement.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sammy. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, the updated finalized executive director employment contract is approved. Thank you
Madam
all.
Chair, you might want to ask if there were anybody opposed to the vote.
Were there any oppositions to the vote? Okay. All right. We are good then. So we'll move on to our next item. Item B, succession planning subcommittee update. Sammy and Chris.
Yeah, Chris, feel free to fill in any gaps. I'll share a high-level overview of the discussion. And since there's a record here, I want to be mindful of how much detail to share. And for the record, I want to just start with the committee for the succession, or subcommittee for the succession planning is charged to provide some ideas and recommendations of how succession planning would look like. And any recommendations will be presented to the executive committee and with the intention of presenting it to the board before it's finalized. So we're doing the homework before we operationalize any of those ideas. The framework of the succession planning is what should we look for in case of a vacancy, or and what is the parameters in terms of timeline and considerations the executive committee, the president-elect, and the full board should be looking at as they engage in those discussions. The intention behind that is maintaining business continuity and the commitment to the long-term strategic goals of the organization. Mary and I and Chris have met together. Chris graciously provided really great resources from her very recent experience in a college level or university level to provide some content and skeleton to what that succession planning would look like. I want to just highlight one question mark, and happy to receive any feedback from you individually. We'll try to incorporate it later on. It is whether we should be very prescriptive on what should happen in each step. So it is a playbook for future leadership that tells them what to do specifically, or give parameters high level and keep the authority of decision making for future executive committees, boards, and boards presidents and vice presidents and presidents-elect. So basically, the question that we're trying to think about, and we don't need to discuss this right now, but just to be in your thinking as you will receive our recommendations, or if you want to provide any feedback, which is how detailed should we be, or how flexible should we be, depending on the circumstances that we will encounter or we would encounter in the future. And that's really high level of where we're at. We're hoping for a more detailed update in the next executive committee succession planning meeting in August. Chris?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on what you just said, Sammy. I think it's going really well. Of course, anything with Mary goes really well. And she's done an excellent job of synthesizing our thoughts. And the main discussion, and I would say the struggle we're having, is between being enough detail to make this succession planning helpful to any executive committee in the future who needs to engage in it, but also not so prescriptive as that it bogs the committee down. So we want guidelines that make sense with enough information that so we're trying to basically figure out what needs to happen and how does it need to happen and whose responsibility is it. So those are really the nutshell. And you can get super detailed, and you can be, and maybe that's could be a problem, or maybe you're not detailed enough, and then it isn't really helpful. So that's our tension, right?
So great feedback. I'm glad to hear the progress that's happening. Are there any questions or comments for Sammy or Chris?
Just a quick question, if I could, Madam Chair. Sammy and Chris, when is your next meeting, and will you need staff to schedule that or create a Zoom for you?
They should
I'm
have
going
standing
off camera on. Yeah, I'm going off camera on my iPad, so check the next meeting, unless you have it on top of your head.
It's on the 17th. They're already set. They should already be set.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think that's what we have.
Yep.
Okay, with the transition of Jane leaving and Linnell coming in, I just want to make sure we've got everything covered and scheduled. So we'll make sure we've got that in our calendars here as well.
Thank you. And I think the meeting is, I'll share with you the meeting room number. It was created by Linnell, actually.
I think she.
So we should be.
Yeah.
Sammy, I have that it's at 11 o'clock on the 17th. Is that what you have?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so looking forward to your next update. So thanks for the information. All right, so we will move on to item C, Board of Directors meeting attendance. I'll just share a little bit for Jim. I have you speak on that. I did have an opportunity to speak with a board member where I had some concerns about attendance, had a great discussion, and they did show up to a meeting, which is great. And so I think that there's been some movement with that, or some considerations. I've had some conversations offline with board members, and I think folks are actively looking at their calendars. And I think that letter left some things for folks to think about and consider. And so I think there's been some movement with that. So with that, I'll just hand it over to you, Jim, if you have anything to add.
No, not much, Madam President. I think the letter, I guess, woke people up, for lack of a better term, to make them aware of their attendance at the meetings. And I get it. You are all very busy people. You've ran for your school board. That's your first board. This can be your secondary, or even for some of us, your tertiary board. But it is important that we have a quorum and that business needs to be conducted. So I think the letter set the right tone, Madam President. The one individual board member you had a good conversation with, I think that's beneficial as well. And we are looking at the calendar to not have any conflicts with, at least as we can, the many religious holidays that are on the calendar and other holidays. Obviously, we don't have your personal calendars for family reunions or fishing trips to Idaho, Mr. Rogers, but we attempt to avoid as many as we can, and if there are conflicts, we try to address those as best we can. You'll remember prior to the change in the bylaws, there was a requirement in our bylaws that is very equivalent to what's in current statute for elected school board members, that if you missed so many normal meetings or regular meetings of the school board in a row, the board of directors of OSBA could vote to remove you. That actually happened one time. That language is no longer in our bylaws. It's up to a vote of the board in order to remove a board member, quote unquote, for cause. We've not ever had a discussion or a delineation on that. And if it ever got to that level, I think it would be up to this committee and the board to have those discussions. But I think the letter set the right tone. And I received a couple of reach outs from folks. And I know you did too, Madam President. So I think everybody's aware of their duty. It's just, you're all busy people and we understand that.
Yeah, so one thing I think it's important, because I did reply to someone who was concerned about, oh, thanks, Emily. We'll see you next time. I think something that was concerning, or that they brought up, I wanted to clarify, is that they thought that the letter was an indication or the decision to demand perfect attendance, and it's not to be mandatory. We understand things happen. So I think it would be good practice for future leadership to establish, or maybe reconvening the governance committee and having some language drafted that talks about, that just provides some guideline for attendance, something that we can kind of measure. And I think that's something we had talked about before, Jim, offline. There are some other items I'd like to reconvene the governance committee. So I think if I can, I would like to just have that as something that the governance committee can work on and draft something that would be amenable. So that's on my list. So we
I've
can
got it on the governance committee list as well, and you and I will compare our lists then, Madam President.
Okay, sounds good.
And I saw Chris Cronin had her hand raised, I think, but it went back down. So
I was just you kind of already addressed it. I was gonna ask whether board members reached out to you, Sonia, and them, or if you had to contact them, because for me, that's an indication of their interest.
Yeah, I had a couple reach out by email, and then I did have a very lengthy conversation with one person where it was just concern, and it seemed to kind of, wake them up, and they did attend. So we'll see if that continues. I do have some in-person meetings with board members this week who are making some decisions, and so I'll be able to share the results of those conversations. So I think it's provided some time for people to reflect on their capacity and what they can what they can do. A lot of us are very busy on several boards, and I think a lot of folks are considering, well, if I'm taking up space and I'm not giving my all, then maybe I should consider. So I think some other folks are having making those decisions. So I'll be able to share more later as I have those discussions. So, all right, great. So we will move on. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to you, Sonia, for actually bringing this up as an issue. And I appreciate I share your belief that people, if you're on a board, you need to be, even if we are busy, and I'm on other boards as well. But if you can't be participatory and contributing, then you need to make way for someone else. And I really appreciate you taking this up as an issue.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to say that one thing that has happened a couple of times, and this is with our Legislative Policy Committee, we have struggled to have a quorum the last couple of meetings that I remember. I think once the last meeting and one last year where, we were all like texting folks to have folks jump on, and that's a very large group, and it's I don't know, it's really troubling that we have such a large group, but we can't meet a quorum. We actually have to get on the phone and text people. So I don't know, maybe there needs to be some kind of communication with that group as well. It's really important, and particularly this in a legislative year, we need to have that yeah, it's happening with all of our committees. So just a conversation that just needs to be had by all that are doing this work, really important work. So. All right, so if there are no other comments, we will move on. Sammy, do you?
I would, yeah, just a quick thing. As we go to fill in the vacancies, and I think we have 4 or 5 vacancies coming up, for 3, sorry. I used to reach out to folks just telling them thank you for applying and just leaving that note. I'm wondering if it is for you, Sonia or Chris or me or Jim, to reach out to the applicants and tell them, hey, here's the expectation and about the attendance, just to make sure to gauge their, not only their interest, but their commitment to spare the time. This is not one of those meeting boards that it's okay to skip a few meetings here and there. So I'm wondering if that would be a good practice that we can start, especially for with the applicants, even if the applicants is one person, at least we start with them on the right foot of telling them, here's what to expect.
Generally, Jane and I have done that when we get the applications in, Sammy, just so you're aware. And normally what we also get is somebody who applies, they reach out and say, what, you know, we do put it in the announcement, but what is the time commitment? So it is something that Jane and I have done in the past, and Linnell and I will continue that going forward. So we'll need to put that on our list, Linnell, as we move forward. And just so you're aware, we do have 3 seats that are open: a Marion seat, a Southeast seat, and not the Clackamas seat, I'm trying to remember now, the Central region. We already have an applicant for the Southeast. Many of you know Steve Lowell, who has sat on our Legislative Policy Committee. Steve did not want to run against Lori Theros for that seat ever. They're really good friends. And since Lori did not win re-election, Steve's already got his stuff in, so.
Well, I will say, I think that for someone who does recruitment statewide, I do that for Oregon Community Foundation. I think it's important when you're looking at a termed committee commitment. What I do is I share the year's calendar with them, and we go through their calendar and we confirm. I mean, I think telling someone the time commitment in general terms is great, but if you're giving them actual dates so they can put those on their calendar as they are coming into that work, I think that's beyond the first step. I think if we have a published calendar, that should be part of the application materials. I think that would probably alleviate some concern. And also just sharing the importance of responding to our admin teams as they're, administrative folks as they're asking for response for due to polls and email communication. That also needs to be relayed as well. So just a thought.
Linnell, can you put that on the list for you and I to discuss as we meet? Thank you.
Chris, you have your hand up.
Sorry for all my hand raising.
No, you're fine.
Do we have an applicant for the Central Oregon position?
Linnell, have we received any applicants for those yet? I think we just opened it, so I would say probably not as of right now, Chris.
We do not have paperwork, but we do have a couple of people who have indicated that they are interested.
I was thinking about Melissa that Washington DC with us, if that would be something of interest to her.
Ben Lapine.
Yeah.
Board.
Yeah, she had a great interaction with
Mhm.
yeah, she'd probably be great.
Great.
I wonder about her capacity, but yeah, absolutely reach out.
I'll reach out to her.
That'd be great.
You will, in my weekly updates, as we get folks filing in paperwork, I will let you and the board know who's coming in with names, because Linnell has already sent out a doodle poll to get the board together to do the appointment. So
I want to ask how that's going, but yeah, I don't think I want to know. I know I responded first, so I was the first one. All right, any other comments on attendance or vacancies? Okay, we will move on. So we'll move on to item D, board self-evaluation tool. Jim, I'll let you start our discussion.
So the tool has, you all selected the tool. It is being created by Mary Paulson, and I'm going to have Mary send that out because she still has an OSBA account and is doing some work for us on a contract basis. And then she will also tabulate those. So y'all remember, you looked at the various samples that were out there, you modified between the Texas and I can't remember the other state right now off the top of my head, I'm sorry. You made some modifications to it. Mary has created that document, and we will be sending it out so that when we get together face to face in September in Hood River, you will have that tool. It will be sent out electronically. We will tabulate, and Mary will keep track of who has responded. And y'all know Mary, if you don't respond, she'll be on you. So I'm tasking Mary with doing that work so that it's kind of not internalized here, but as a contract employee, Mary will work, and Sonia, she'll be reaching out to you with regard to that, because
Okay.
the email will come from you to the board,
Okay.
Madam President, with regard to that, but we don't want to send it out now. It's too far out.
Right.
It'll probably come out the first part of, I think Mary was thinking the first part of August. And remember, it's not that multiple detailed one that we looked at from other nonprofits. This was a mix. And Mary has estimated it'll take you less than 12 minutes to fill it out, unless you really want to write detailed comments.
And remind me again how long the board will have to complete that?
Mary was going to give them 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
But
And
she kind of felt like sending it out now was not the best opportunity that it should go out, because we're not meeting until the 3rd week in September. So August, even though that's not great either, Mary will stay on top of it to make sure we get as close to 100% as we possibly can.
Sounds good. All right. Any thoughts or questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Jim. All right, so we will move on to item E, the ESG investing. Jim.
And also have Chris jump in here as well. We are working to schedule a meeting with Brent from DA Davidson to go through this. You'll remember this is a discussion that was led by Bill Grout prior to his not getting elected to his local board. And one of the things that we had talked about and that I had mentioned at our last board meeting was the opportunity for us to create a lens by which we look at what we invest in. Brent has had some experience with this. You'll remember he talked about it. Not that every decision would go to the board. That doesn't give us the flexibility and nimbleness that we need in order to make it, but that we look at a lens, a criteria of if we have a bond called, for example, a corporate bond called, and Brent is looking at replacing that in some way, shape, or form, what are the things we should pay attention to in order to assure that the company's bond that we are going to be investing in has some corporate good behind it, that it's not creating landmines. They're not a company that built landmines that place them all over, or the most recent thing in the news was the cluster bombs that we sent to the Ukraine. Those type of things that we would look at as a lens to assure that while it's not public money in the true sense like at your school district, these are semi-public funds that go to the goodness of school boards and public entities, that we would create that. And then at the end of each calendar year, there would be a report to the board done on our various investments and how they met that criteria for moving forward. So before all that's developed, that would come to the finance committee, but this will be Chris and Brent and now Emily Smith, who's our secretary treasurer, and Emily Nischek. We got too many Emilys coming to our meetings, guys.
It's okay. It's
we
all
had too
good.
many Chris's for a while.
It's all good.
But we will meet and work through those things, and then it'll come to the finance committee, and we will begin this process during this calendar year is the idea, Madam President.
Okay.
Chris Davidson, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think, I think just as we go through this process too, I think it's gonna, help to give the board, a little more education too, because I think sometimes they don't necessarily understand the investment world, because just because we buy a stock doesn't necessarily mean you're giving that company money like you do when buying a bond, because they're selling bonds to fundraise for something. But stocks, you may just be buying from another stockholder. So just because we buy stock X doesn't necessarily mean we've given money to company X. We are just owning a piece of company X. And that might even be the Robin Hood scenario where we're taking from a maybe not so great company and taking their profits and using it to do good. And so I just kind of want to highlight some of those kinds of things too, when people think that, oh my God, you're putting all this money in all these different places. Not necessarily. The bonds definitely, yes, but not so much on the equity side. And so I think, putting some of that out there too and doing some of that education and stuff will help put people's minds at ease a little more too. But, like Jim said, I think just develop a set of questions we're going to ask ourselves before we pick an investment, but still let us have the nimbleness to, that's a great deal, we need to jump on it, or that interest rate's super high, we got to take advantage of it. Those kinds of things. We can't, like you said, you can't get the board together for a quick meeting or an appointment of new board members. What are we going to do every time we want to change an investment or do something different? So, we just need to keep that flexibility available to us, but, keep the organization's financial health at the forefront of everything.
And Madam President, the one other thing that I would add is we have pretty tight requirements on creditworthiness of what we invest in. Our investment policy isn't, we are not day traders and we do not buy penny stocks. There are levels and gradations of investments, whether it's a bond or an equity, that we are allowed, or the private equity that we've gotten into, that we are allowed to go into. So they have to meet a certain criteria already. This would be a lens in which we would say, is it a good company that we should be investing in?
Okay.
And then the anticipation is a report to the board on the various, and we don't do as many trades as we did when this portfolio was created. I'm thinking maybe 2 a month now, Chris, is what we're seeing. It's not a ton, but it gives us the opportunity to put a lens on it and then report to the board. We sold XY bond, we bought this bond, and here are the questions that we ask, and it met all or near all criteria. It didn't meet this one, but here's the reason why we went with it in light of that question. So that's the idea. It'll be coming from Emily Smith, Chris, Brent, Emily Nischik, and myself to the finance committee, and ultimately to the board to look at as well.
Well,
Yeah,
thanks for.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I just had a few comments. I will say that I think that this is a real opportunity to educate the board. What I wouldn't say necessarily is that we're not knowledgeable about finances. I'm the child of a vice president. My mom was the VP, and I do my own little small micro investing. I think what's important is, as board members, the context of what that looks like for this board, where we can provide our feedback, or and I think the lens is going to be a really important tool and arm for our board to exercise to have an understanding of, we have a fiduciary responsibility as board members of OSBA. How can we exercise that? How can we be informed enough to say this investment doesn't look good for the work that we do? So I think there's an opportunity to educate the context of being on a board and what that looks like. So I think that's really important. If we inform the board, they're better informed or educated, there's a lens, then they feel like they also have some agency too. And I think that's what Bill was trying to pass on. And I think we have some pretty sophisticated folks that understand finance, but they may not understand the context of what happens with this board and the investments. And I think, Chris, you're going to be great at informing and sharing what this could potentially look like for the board. Any other comments? I did have a couple of questions. Anybody else have any comments? Nobody else? Okay. I wanted to get an idea of the timeline. Jim, you were saying that they would have this small group would meet and I guess start drafting what this lens might look like. And then when could you anticipate that the finance committee would see that?
Well, it is hopeful that we would have the finance committee take a look at it after our September board meeting.
Okay.
And then hopefully have it ready to go by the November board meeting.
Okay.
So remember, convention, we're not doing a program on Sunday of convention. So we're looking at not a full board meeting like we would normally do, but we could bring other business to that board meeting. And this is one we're projecting that we could bring to that November board meeting, assuming again, that we can get everybody together on a finance committee. But with the smaller group beginning the work, that makes it a lot easier, Madam President.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you both. Thanks, Sammy.
Thanks, Sammy.
Joy family.
Thanks, team. See you later.
All right. No other comments. So yeah, it looks like we are at the end of our agenda. Any other comments or thoughts before we close today?
Madam President, I just wanted to mention one thing for the executive committee that I will be dealing with today. We've had a board member complain about the fact that OSBA is not going to be covering their conference costs any longer. Remember, the determination during the budget was that OSBA would not cover that anymore. We have one OSBA board member as of right now who is complaining about that. I am going to email that board member and CC you, Madam President, on that email, just so you're aware.
Thank you.
There are still certain officers get their coverage because they're required to be there, but I will explain the process and the budget adoption and the work that went into that. You will see that email later today, Madam President.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to hearing that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. We are adjourned. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see everybody again.
Bye.